Hello ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Hearthstone Flavor of the Month. Today we're going to be checking out a warrior deck from Mayo BR over at hearthpawn.com.
All will fall in the name of Hellscream!
A control based deck with its killing power all loaded into late game legendaries, it runs a high price tag at around 10,000 dust, although there are a few cards that can be changed out for cheaper options. It uses weapons for a lot of board control and balances the damage you take in the early and mid game with some strong armor generation. It's a variant on a deck from late last year that was very popular but has been updated to the current meta. There are a few cards that can be swapped out to keep up to date, and we'll talk about those in a moment.
They are weapons of war.
So to start out, we have our weapons and control cards. The weapons we're going to be using are 2 fiery war axes for the early game and 2 death bites, which will see some mid game removal as well as some AoE. Something it's important to remember about Death's Bite is that its second attack will actually deal 5 damage to the target minion. This can be really useful to take out turn 5 sludge belchers, which is a very common play. Now we have our other forms of removal to help control the board. Whirlwind is often very useful against paladins or hunters that can often have a lot of 1 health minions out. It also combos really nicely with a lot of other cards, including Execute, which can be used to destroy a damaged enemy minion. This is also nice with the Cruel Taskmaster, which can be used to either deal 1 damage to set up an Execute or to buff a friendly minion. Brawl is a great board clear for the mid to late game and can turn the tide of a match very quickly. There's also Shield Slam, which with the way this deck generates armor can pretty much kill anything in the right circumstances, but works great in the early game as well to clear any minor threats. To generate armor, we have Armorsmiths who can combo really lovely with the Taskmaster, Whirlwind or Death's Bite. Shield Maidens and Shield Block also help to generate armor fast for big shield slam damage. Next we get some card draw from the Acolyte of Pain, who combos with the same things as the Armorsmith, making these 2 cards really nice to have out on the board at the same sort of time. The Bomb Lobber, which is a card that can be swapped out depending on the meta at the time and what you're running into the most. There's also the Anti-Heal Bot, who can be used to recover your health, and the Sludge Belcher, who will often soak up an entire turn's worth of damage. Now as for those legendaries, we start out with Sylvanas Windrunner. This card can be tough to play around and can cause your opponent all kinds of problems. Baron Geddon, this is a good AoE and a big scary minion on the board that they're going to have to deal with. Dr. Boom, he's just one of the best cards in the game at the moment. Hellscream, this is your big finisher. Try to use something to take his damage up to 10 or more before attacking, like the Whirlwind, Cruel Taskmaster or the Death's Bite AoE. The final card is Alexstrasza. Late game, this is the way to drop your opponent's health hard, meaning you can play for board control throughout the match.
There is no place for you!
Now there are quite a few cards in this deck that are exchangeable if you don't happen to have them, or if you find the meta has shifted and certain cards have become less useful. As we already mentioned, Bomb Lobbers are fairly interchangeable, and swapping at least one for something else around the same cost isn't a bad idea. The Keyzan can be a good swap if you're fighting lots of mages or hunters. 2 shield blocks can sometimes be a bit much, I find. It does have synergy with Shield Slam, but sometimes having both means you just end up playing one because it's in your hand. As for the pricey cards, Shield Slams are pretty much a must-have for removal, and Broad is also a hard one to replace. Geddon is really there for the AoE damage, so anything that does similar could be okay. The Abomination or Explosive Sheep could work. Dr. Boom, if ever there was a card I would recommend crafting, this is it. He's used in so many decks at the moment, you're mad not to have him, and even if he gets nerfed, you can get your dust back from him and buy something else. Hellscream is pretty hard to replace, he's that big late game damage you need to finish the match, however Gorehowl is a fairly good swap. Alexstrasza is the final legendary card and there really isn't anything quite like it. If you don't happen to have it, just go for something big, scary and late game. While we're on the subject of card swaps, some things to think about might be getting Ragnaros in there if you happen to have him. The Iron Juggernaut can also be really fun. Lastly, Harrison Jones is another great card that could see some real use in this deck.
Now you know your place!
Fiery War Axe is nearly always a great card to keep. Anyone you suspect of having lots of small minions, like a Paladin or Hunter, take a Whirlwind. Cruel Taskmaster is also really good if you have something like Execute, if you're up against someone who's going to be playing tough minions early on, like a Druid. The Armorsmith and Acolyte are also good. Also, if you're going second, keep the coin around for something like Death's Bite, Belcher or Bomb Lobber.
Witness the power!
The strategy is to really control the board as best you can. There are no crazy combos here, just make good plays. Use your weapons and removal early on to control the board. Don't go for the face unless there is no other option, and don't be afraid to use Execute and Shield Slam early on if you need to. Try to secure the board and get value out of any minions you put out. Brawl, Sylvanas, Shield Slams, Execute and your weapons should control it fine into the late game, and dropping Baron Gaddon is a great way to close out the mid game and draw out any big game hunters. Then you have plenty of firepower to close out the match.
Die with honor!
This deck is pretty good against a lot of the popular decks currently in the meta, as it's very aggro heavy, and so long as you get a good starting hand you shouldn't have a problem. In general, Warrior is a pretty solid counter to Rogue, and as all Rogue is one of the most popular decks at the moment, this helps a lot. It also works well against Mech Mage, as you can deal with their minions quickly, shutting down any mech synergies, and it's also solid against Freeze Mage, especially with a Ragnaros in there, as he helps out in the late game. If you're finding yourself losing to a certain class a lot, just look at swapping out the cards we discussed earlier.
Weak!
This deck is built to counter a lot of the meta, and in the right matchup it's great. It has a wide range of removal from AoEs, single target spells and weapons, and is certainly capable of taking down multiple big minions in a single turn. It packs plenty of late game damage to close out the match, and has a number of cards that can be swapped out depending on the current meta, making it a deck that can be easily adjusted by players of most skill levels to suit the matchups they're getting. The drawbacks are that it is very pricey, and with quite a few late game minions and cards, you can get screwed over quite hard in the mulligan. It tends to float mana here and there as well, as the cards don't curve out that well at the start, but it's really nice to see a warrior deck that's able to climb the ladder and beat a lot of the more popular decks. You can check out this deck over at hearthpawn.com, which you will find linked below, and if you're looking for more Hearthstone information, I would recommend checking out hearthstone.gamepedia.com, which has all the information you could ever need. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you haven't already, and leave us a comment below if you have anything to add. For now though, I've been ASCII, and thank you for watching.